Welcome to episode 2 of our soup series. I am very excited today because we are making one of my all-time favorite fall soups, French onion soup. What I love about this recipe so much is that it actually happens to be completely vegetarian. So of course, for this recipe, we are getting started with onion. A lot of onion. So let's get our chopping hats on, shall we? So the way I like to do this is simply by cutting off the top of the onion and then cutting it in half lengthwise. Then I simply peel the onion and cut it into little half moon shapes. Today I'm getting started with some yellow onion. You could absolutely do this with some sweet onion if you wanted to instead. I would not recommend red onion though, because you end up with a bit of a grayish soup and I just don't think it looks as aesthetically pleasing. Then I do that about 12 more times, and what I end up with is a pile of beautiful sliced onions that we are going to caramelize. For this soup, I'm going to be using this large Dutch oven, but you could just as easily do this with a large soup pot instead. So I'm going to get started by adding a good glug of oil and some butter to my pot. The reason we're using both oil and butter in this recipe is because the oil actually prevents the butter from burning, which is exactly what we're going for. Once that butter is all nice and frothy, we are going to add our beautiful onion. When you first add your onions, it's going to feel like a lot, but trust me, these are going to basically sweat down to almost nothing. I'm going to stir my onions until they're evenly coated with oil and butter, and then I'm going to put the lid on my pot. I'm going to turn my heat down to medium and let these beauties sweat it out for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, I'm going to take off my lid and season up my onions. This means a whole lot of beautiful salt and some freshly cracked black pepper. I'm also adding a sprinkle of granulated sugar because that's going to help our onions caramelize. Then I'm going to leave the lid off and let these beauties cook for about 30 minutes. You're going to want to stir your onions every 5 minutes to make sure they're not sticking to the bottom of the pan. After about 30 minutes, your onions will look something like this. Beautiful, brown, caramelized, and your whole house is going to smell amazing. That means it's time to add our flour. Now I'm adding just a couple tablespoons of flour and I'm just going to cook them for about a minute to get rid of that floury flavor. Then it's time to deglaze our pan. Now traditionally this is done with wine or sherry, but I actually like to do it with some apple cider. Now I like to do this for 2 reasons. First of all, it keeps the recipe booze-free, which I know is important to a lot of you out there. Second of all, it adds a whole other level of flavor because of its natural sweetness. Trust me on this one, it is the perfect complement to those beautiful caramelized onions. Once you've added your cider, you're going to want to use your spoon to scrape up all of the brown bits from the bottom of the pan. Next, we're going to add our broth. Now in this case, I'm using vegetable broth because I wanted to keep this recipe completely vegetarian. But you could absolutely use beef stock if that's what you prefer. Now you could leave this soup just as it is because it is already delicious. But I believe the 2 secrets to a great French onion soup are thyme and thyme. So we're going to add a few sprigs of fresh thyme and then let this beautiful soup simmer for at least 30 more minutes. One thing that's really important to do, I put those thyme leaves in whole because it makes it much easier to fish them out. After 30 minutes, this beautiful soup is ready for the finishing touches. So we're simply going to ladle our soup into some oven-safe dishes and then top it with some beautiful crostini and some shredded Gruyere cheese. Then into the oven it goes until that cheese is ooey, gooey, and bubbly, and the whole thing is just bursting with autumn flavor. You honestly could not ask for better fall comfort food. I really hope you'll give this tasty recipe a try, and if you do, be sure to tweet or Instagram me a photo because you know I love seeing what you're coming up with in your very own kitchens. And if you have any other great soup ideas, be sure to leave them in the comment section below because I'll have lots more tasty soup recipes coming soon. And finally, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe because there's lots more deliciousness where this came from.